Yeah, I've been drinking. You got a problem with that? Fucking Game Boy? Hello and welcome to another episode of 3 Kilobytes. My name's Jason3KB. And here is to the Nintendo Game Boy. Oh, it's strong. I might be a little drunk for this one, but I wanted to talk. This is special for me because I'm an old man now. The Game Boy originally... I'm drunk. I just wanted to have a little celebration about the Game Boy. It's 25 years old now. The Game Boy released... I'm gonna try really hard to not fucking be drunk. It's not gonna happen. The Game Boy released on July 31st, 1989. So for some of you out there, that's a long time ago. I'm old as fuck. I'm old. The Game Boy originally sold 118 million units. That is ridiculous. Can you imagine 119 million Game Boys sitting out there just like rotting away in dumpsters, in the bottom of landfills, in like people's drawers? Oh, it's a tragedy. Now, 118 million units, that's not just the original Game Boy, that's including, according to the statistics, the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Light, and the Game Boy Color units. So those were very popular. I remember the day that the Game Boy Color came out, and you could play Pokemon in color, and it was like, Pikachu's yellow! Now, the Game Boy is actually the second generation of handheld systems for Nintendo. They had Game & Watches beforehand. I obviously was kind of a little bit old for that. I know that sounds crazy, but 25 years ago, the whole landscape of gaming was very different. I can hardly remember exactly what I was like playing back in the day, but I remember the day that my mom announced to me, hey, you know, there's this thing coming out. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm actually going to buy it for you. And at the time, I was playing my Nintendo like a fiend. I think just around that time is when Mega Man 3 came out. And I remember going to my friend's house and just playing the shit out of that. And that was the first Mega Man game which allowed you to slide. And that was a big deal for us back in the day because it was like, you know, one of those features that they add to a sequel that's not in the original that you've always wanted to do in a video game. And now it's in Mega Man. Boom, you can slide. So it was a big deal. You know, at the time for us, we would come home from school and it was just Nintendo. That was it. Mega Man, Legend of Zelda, Tetris. We just play these games endlessly. And this is also around the time that Mario 3 was gigantic. I remember the day that my friend had rented Mario 3 from the store down the street, and he brought the manual to school, and we were looking at the one level where everything's large, everything's big, and Mario's, you know, his usual side, but everything else is huge. And we were like looking at the fish that was in fuck, I am drunk. That was in the manual, and holy shit, we wanted to skip. This was like the beginning days of skipping, but I'm going on a rant here about Nintendo NES. That was important at the time, and why I bring that up was, for kids in school, you only could really talk about these video games at school. Then, when you went home, you played them. And it wasn't like you can hop on the internet or, you know, just grab the phone and, well, you'd talk on the phone a little bit, like, I beat this level, what did you do? But there was no internet. So, some of you out there were like, what? No internet? It was crazy. You had to go outside, jump on your BMX bike down to your friend's house and tell him, I just beat, you know, Vigilante on my Sega Master System, bitch. And he'd be like, oh, no, what are we going to do now? Are you going to play it again? And then, you know, at the time, I got to bring this up. There was no such thing as demos. There was really only, you know, rentals and buying a full tilt game. And there was magazines to tell you if these games were worth buying. And sometimes you just tell your mom, like, I want a new game. And she would just be like, I got you this game. And it was like Vigilante for the Sega Master System. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll play this game. And you pop it in and you'd have to play the shit out of it. Because back in the day, games were a little bit more expensive in Canada than they are now. and you'd only, well, for me, because I came from a very poor family where my mom beat me, I would, well, she didn't actually beat me, I should say that. She hit me, but she didn't beat me. Beating is different. But she would bring home a game and be like, boom, this is the game you get to play for 6 months straight. And it would be like, oh God, I hope it's good. So everything happened at school and at home. You would go to school and it would be like your internet and you would talk about video games. But for me, the most important part about all of this was the day that the Game Boy was brought home to me by my mother. She spent so much money that day. Now, one thing that I have to bring up here, the battery life of the original Game Boy would take 4 AAA batteries, and I mean, those things, I was looking to see if there's batteries over there, but like, you guys don't know what fucking batteries are, especially you women, you know what I mean? Like, stupid. Yeah, they keep drinking. So the battery life was one thing about this system that needed to change, and drastically, and that happened about 2 or 3 months after the system came out. They released an adapter that you could plug in and charge on the go. So you could go to school with your Game Boy and challenge your friends, and this is where the link cable comes in. And this was special. This was something that we always talked about. We were like, imagine you could just play games on the go, but you could play 2-player, and this link cable would plug into the side of the Game Boy and allow you to play games 2 players. It was just like, oh my God, and you could face off in your scores and like how the achievements that you could come across in the game based on what your friends would design, because back in the day there was no such thing as achievements. You'd kind of go to your friend and be like, I dare you to try to get to this point in the game without jumping, or this, or you know, with only jumping 4 times. And those challenges were not something that were put online or talked about on like the internet, because once again it didn't exist. So you'd go to school and you'd be like, I did what you said, and they'd be like, prove it. And you used to be able to record on VHS through your VCR, and that was like, that's a whole other topic where you record your gameplays, and that's where gameplay commentary actually started for me. I mean, 25 years ago I was recording my Mario 3 footage just in case I would do something insane and then run to my friend's house with a VHS tape and be like, boom, I did it, sucker. But the Game Boy, it allowed you to go to your friend's house and experience video games like you never experienced before, because there was those moments where you're playing Mario 3 and you're like, fuck, I wish we were at the park. Well, guess what? Grab your Game Boy, bring it to the park, sit on the park benches, whole new atmosphere for you. So it was this new social gathering that allowed you to get out of the house and play, you know, in the woods, or that sounds kind of fucking weird, but in the woods, you know, at just your friends' houses, and just turn it on, be like, boom, look at my high score. And it was like games like the Super Mario game that really showed you like the advancement of video games at the time, because at the time you really had those Tiger handheld systems that didn't do too much in terms of gameplay. You know, looking back, I remember playing those Tiger handheld game systems that, you know, had one game built into them. So it would be like Double Dragon on the go, but it was only Double Dragon, and it was about $39 at the time. Back then, $39 would get you, you know, a couple of used Game Boy games to pop into your system at any point, and this is where the Game Boy really took off. I mean, you know, obviously the biggest game that sold for the system was Tetris, because it was bundled in there, but so many other great games. You know, this is where I want you guys to chime in and let me know, what are some of your favorite games for the Game Boy? I just wanted to take this sort of look back. You know, as I'm drinking, celebrating, let's have a little toast to the Game Boy. It's 25 years old today, plus 1 day, because I should have filmed this yesterday, but let me know in the comments below, have you played the Game Boy? Because, you know, what's kind of crazy is I'm 33 years old now, and when the Game Boy came out, I was like 8, and I'm like, oh yeah. And looking back, I look at the retro community, and you guys are crazy, hardcore into gaming, but like, how many of you actually went out there who were not even born at the time and picked up a Game Boy? So let me know, comment below all of your Game Boy stories. What's the first game you played on Game Boy? That's another question. I could keep going and going, but I'm fucking drunk. So peace out. Thank you, Nintendo, for the Game Boy. Love ya. Don't know how that hurt me. Thank you for staying around, and if you've left because, you know, it's changed, what are you doing? This is a fucking show about video games. Just watch.
Oh, fuck, I'm drunk.